Dear all, welcome to our session on best practices in industrial IoT security from the perspective of Bavaria, the largest state in Germany. My name is Christian Geltinger. I'm the representative of the state of Bavaria in Japan with office in Tokyo. Because Bavaria is the leading manufacturing and industrial region in Europe, the topics of cyber and industrial security receive a lot of attention and investment from our government in partnership with the industry, both manufacturers and security service providers and academia. So it's no surprise that we're already hosting a session at last year's Japan Security Summit with the kind support of Chuzi Sensei. And we had also organized several German-Japanese security forums in Tokyo in partnership with the Security Network Munich. This network is also organizing the annual Munich Cybersecurity Conference on the eve before the Munich Security Conference. Today, it is my honor to introduce to you two of our leading outstanding experts in industrial security. First, Dr. Robert Korone. Korone Hakase acts as coordinator of the ZDB topic platform Cybersecurity, which is under the umbrella of Bayern Innovative company in Nuremberg. Nuremberg is also home of the ITSA conference. His mission is to enhance resilience and robustness for Bavarian businesses against cybersecurity threats. He studied electronics and information technology and holds a PhD in medical engineering. He's author and co-author of more than 30 publications and 10 patents. Second, Dr. Thomas Nove acts as Corporate Information Security Officer and responsible for data security for the Krones Group. Krones, headquartered in Regensburg, Bavaria, is one of Germany's hidden champion companies and a world market leader in bottling and filling stations. Nove Hakase studied informatics and economy and got his PhD on collecting and analyzing data about security frauds. He gives regular lectures at the University of Regensburg and at the University for Applied Research in Deggendorf, which is close to a BMW plant. He's a member of the advisory board of the German Alliance for Cybersecurity, deputy chair of the working group Information Security at the German Association for Machinery, VDMA in short, and economics advisor of ZDB platform Cybersecurity. Both will engage in a dialogue in best practices in industrial IoT, ranging from secure remote services to secure operations and apps for remote control. While in times of a pandemic and work from home style, these topics became even more relevant worldwide. So without further ado, let me hand over the floor to our experts, Mr. Korone and Mr. Nove, please.
Good morning, Thomas. It's really nice to be here at your site at Krones.
Good morning, Robert. Welcome to Krones. It's great to have you here. I think this is a perfect place to experience a company with more than 60 years of tradition in mechanical engineering, and that is at the same time very innovative in the field of digitalization and industrial IoT.
The right place for our presentation, for our content which we have to present today. A significant time to get deep insights in cybersecurity aspects of a company which produces products as Krones, which are distributed all over the world and where remote services and management from outside is keen for your business.
Yeah, maybe you don't see Krones products in a shop if you go there, but every day, millions of glass bottles, of cans, of PET containers run through a Krones line. So that's why probably many of the products you have were in touch with some Krones line. And as a supplier for complete systems, Krones provides breweries, beverage bottlers, and food producers all over the world with individual machines, but also with complete production lines and plants. In addition to that, with our digitalization solutions, we increase productivity of our customers. And for digitalization, reliability and trust is key for us. And that is why security also in our products, not only in our internal IT, but also for our products, is a such important topic for us now and especially in the future.
It's really like a gift that we have you in this role here, and also ransom demands correspond to the enormous damage potential it has.
You can be sure it's a huge amount if you think about thousands of bottles or cans running through a line per hour, maybe 60, 80,000 per hour, and if you have a business interruption of several hours or days, that would cause significant damage. And we've seen that damage all over the industry in many companies, many mechanical engineering companies that in the past thought, oh, security, that's not a big thing for me, but they were affected by ransomware and they had production outages of days or even weeks and damages up to several millions of euros.
So this makes this field so interesting for criminal organizations with a growing tendency, with a growing phase.
Definitely, it's a business,
right?
But only on the wrong side.
On the wrong side. So we were fighting against that, and we start with best practice in industrial IoT. Thomas, what are your first thoughts by thinking about best practice in IoT?
Well, if I think about our workshop series, I think we had 6 great workshops on a variety of topics. But definitely for me, especially in these days, I think secure remote access will be the first topic to talk about, because the secure connection to a production site and from a production site for accessing the site, but also for transferring data from that site, that is really key for future business models.
And we start with secure remote services in our panel series, where we had to acknowledge that growing numbers of intrusion events are reported. Some studies stated that in 2021, ransomware attacks, which attacked directly industrial plants and equipment, overtook even the attacks by email. They were more. For main reason. One is mal-configured and maintained remote access channels. They are often easy to break. The second are still unbelievable user and password credentials, which are sometimes still defaults or very easy to decrypt. You know the examples. And for attackers, is this an invitation? Low effort and almost no risk. But fortunately, our best practice partners presented better approaches.
Yeah, they definitely did. We had 2 contributions, one from a single company, from Groth-Beckert, and the other one from our German Mechanical Engineering Industry Association, the VDMA, which is currently working on has a working group on remote access patterns, I would say. But maybe I can give some more details on that later on.
Right.
So I think really this remote access is becoming important because it will increase efficiency and productivity. So where in the past you had an engineer with a need to travel to a customer site, if there was a problem, you had the need to travel there. Now, within minutes or even seconds, you can access the site and get a holistic picture. Getting data from the site, maybe getting even more insights with augmented reality, like we do at Krones with some glasses. But that, of course, you mentioned the damages, the threats. There are challenges, but I think we shouldn't let the risks dominate, but we should take a look at the good examples that prove that you can also do that in a secure manner.
And I think there's no question that digitization opens up such very really promising opportunities that we could not draw back, we could not go behind that. We have to tackle the risks and to do our, let me say, homework on optimizing security.
Yeah, and the current COVID-19 pandemic, it really showed the necessity to do that, because due to travel restrictions, lockdowns, no one was able to travel, so you had to rely on those services.
Right.
That's why.
And if we go a little bit in the best practice example of Groß-Beckert, maybe you can tell also some details on that. I personally remember one aspect. This company has, let me say, driven by pain, a lot of very, very interesting learnings on how they configure their machines on the customer side. And one thing I remember is that they recommend to have one separate firewall for each machine. What do you think about this approach?
Well, I think that is what exactly was one of the learnings. There are several approaches. I think for them it's a perfect solution, because they are mainly using their machines in their own production sites. They have a limited number of suppliers accessing them. And so they can have a very fine-grained concept for accessing the machine, for filtering with firewalls. And they did it with a, I would say, rather low budget, but with smart ideas. Maybe that's not the solution to go for everyone, but for them it's a perfect fit. And what I think is important to point out is that they combined this technical solution, they combine it with the appropriate processes and the governance. So they also talked to their suppliers. They established processes for approving suppliers, for accessing the site. And that the combination is what makes the security holistic. It's not only having some technology in place that will solve all the problems.
Yes. It's a really important aspect, having a close collaboration between manufacturer of machines and the clients which operate the machines in the field. So one thing more, VDMA, you mentioned it already, they recommend avoidance of direct remote administration channels like RDP, Citrix or SSH. Two-factor authentication, they really stress and recommend, in combination with hardening measures like deactivation of SMB 1.0 protocol on all systems, and also patch management for systems and applications everywhere. These are very basic measures, but they are still necessary, as we heard.
Definitely, you always have to start with the basics. What we learned in our series is that there's a very interesting discussion going on in the VDMA. They have established a working group with users of remote support and providers of remote support, and also with solution providers for technical solutions and maybe organizational solutions, to define or identify some blueprints for remote support, which clearly show there is not one single solution where you can say, okay, you have to do it like this, there needs to be some jump host here, or it needs to be a VPN connection, but there might be several architectures that fit the purpose. And it depends on the use case, what architecture pattern to choose. And that's what I've found very interesting, that you could say, okay, there might be some legacy things where everyone agrees, okay, this is more the past, it's old-fashioned, but for the future we see different approaches depending on the size of the partners, depending on the frequency of access, depending on also the needs for documentation, for logs, for analysis. Right. And so that's one of the learnings. You can choose different patterns, but if you decide for one, then you need to have a close dialogue with your partners, yes, depending on who you are, and then establishing that from the beginning to the end.
But right now, Thomas, we should switch to our second topic. It is secure operation. May you please point out a few key items which are relevant?
Well, secure operations for me is probably the most underestimated field in industrial IoT. Because, of course, if you want to sell products, you're talking about the security features that the product has right now. If you want to talk about remote access, then it's about remote access today. But secure operations, that is what lasts over years. And if we're talking about the industry, we're talking about machines with a long lifespan of 20, maybe 30 years, depending on the industry. And that means over the whole lifespan, we need security during operations. And of course, every one of us would like to have the greenfield approach.
This I would add that you do not have this greenfield situation in most of industry companies, so they have a brownfield approach with a mixture of technologies, with security levels and different network security levels. How to cope with this difficult situation?
Well, from our own experience, I would say that's one of the reasons why you should also start with network security, securing on a network level. If you cannot be sure that every component in your network is ready for zero trust settings and is secured by itself, then it's a good thing to create a secure network environment. And in our experience and working with our customers, we also do security consulting for some of them and provide services to them. We found that there are some rather simple steps towards having network security.
You mentioned these simple steps. Should we go a little bit more in detail for that?
Yeah, if you like. Sure, we can. So, first of all, it's transparency. Know what you have. I think that is really the key. Having an inventory. Like every shop, every year they do an inventory of what they have. So it's also necessary to do an inventory on the shop floor and know what are my machines, what are the IT components in my machines. So creating that inventory, that transparency, either by walking around or by having some technology for collecting all the information on the asset, for scanning, and then enriching it with additional data, that is like the foundation. And if you have that first step, then second, you can start to build the proper network architecture, to build network segments. And so that gives a clear structure, for example, a network segment for every production line. That could be a way.
Yes, this is one approach I think Krones uses very, very successfully. And you mentioned this, as I heard from one of our partners, that they in average found 30 to 40% of devices which are not necessary at all, and even they are a little bit dangerous. So this first security audit is really an important step. I would add.
Yeah, you know that saying, never touch a running system. So probably that's what most people do. Or look, there's a red light, so don't touch it. But in this case, for security, it's better to take a closer look and sometimes also to remove a system.
Right. And this step of, if you have your network segmented and everything is fine right now your data streams are a little bit more clear. And how about anomaly detection? These automated approaches are strong, but they are also weak if the data flow is really heterogeneous. If you mix, for example, office data with industrial machine data, so what should be, let me say, what should be taken into account when we analyze data and when we segment the network from this perspective?
Yeah, we had one very good example from a solution provider, from Rebo, Klaus Mochalski, the CEO. He demonstrated how they are using anomaly detection or providing anomaly detection to industrial settings. And I think this is definitely a technology for the future. We need to take a look at it. Also because of the legislation. For example, in Germany, we have the IT security law 2.0, or in Europe, the NIS directive. And they demand for ways to detect anomalies in networks. So probably this could be one of the solutions could be such a anomaly detection appliance.
Yes.
As you mentioned, there are many challenges still for detecting the right patterns, but the technology is improving, also relying not only on statistics, but also on AI mechanisms. So I'm pretty sure that we will see further progress in that area.
It would be really interesting also for smaller companies which could not spend so much personal effort in, let me say, handling all these events which come up by the automatic tools.
Yeah, and that is, I would say, the last point in securing the network, but it's probably the most important. There's a very limited benefit from an anomaly detection solution if you get a lot of alerts, but you have no one to take a look at them, being able to analyze it. Because it's still the same old story that we had with IDS systems in the IT sector. So it's about identifying, getting an alert and identifying, is it a false positive or is it a true positive? And for identifying false positives and true positives in industrial networks, you need knowledge. You need, but not only security knowledge, but you need both. Knowledge on the security part, but also knowledge about the machines and about automation, about typical processes in automation. Typical things might only happen once in a week. For example, in our machines, sometimes there's a cleaning procedure. Okay? So if you don't know that, you might think, oh, something strange happening within that machine. But yeah, that's a regular cleaning process, and that will cause another pattern of communication than the normal operations.
I found it really challenging to generalize it for different companies, but we should work on that in future because it's a big challenge. No?
Yeah, and it's a good opportunity also for those companies to adapt those solutions to specific industries for those specific settings and optimize it, because the data flows within an industrial network are rather stable. If you understand how it works, then and you understand the pattern, then it's rather stable compared to an office environment where people are clicking YouTube and Google and all the time or it's not predictable there.
Very stochastic events. No? So it's a really good approach to clean this network traffic a little bit as far as possible, but also to learn what is normal. No? And normal is a lot, and also the normality changes all the time because the work changes, but not as fast as stochastic traffic coming from the internet. So. Then we can switch to our next interesting working field, and this is, applications and components for that. Remote services often require connections to mobile devices, and I want to switch right now a little bit to secure software applications.
Yeah, I think we had a very nice example there of a collaboration between a traditional engineering company, Maschinenfabrik Rheinhausen, together with a startup from Munich, Build 38, and they had a really innovative ideas. And well, I'm a big fan, you know that, of network security, but that example clearly showed there are situations where there is no network around to be protected and to rely on, but you need to address security at the component level and on the communication level. I think you really took some insights from that example.
That was really impressive, and I want to draw the attention to the image we see. This is a pile for electricity where somebody does the service, and above the pile there is a transformator with a power switch. And this power switch should be controlled, configured, tested, and taken into service. Normally, it is done when the worker goes upstairs to the transformer and does the work manually, which is really dangerous because he is directly in the high voltage area. No good idea. And the solution of, in that case of Build 3038 and Rheinhausen, is to have a wireless link between the worker and the power switch. classical IoT link, which requires full security because it's a critical infrastructure component.
Yeah, and as this picture shows, everyone can virtually access those components physically. It's not like we have a secure production environment with a nice building around it and fences and video surveillance, but they are distributed all over the world.
And the interesting and maybe also a little bit surprising aspect is that they achieved really an app, a solution running on a standard smartphone or tablet. And this tablet could be user-owned. It must not be a special tablet. The security mechanisms which come with this application are so strong and encapsulate the whole application that it could be performed, it could be run very, very safely and securely. I want to switch over to the architecture for that. And we have a complex situation with certificates where the manufacturer for the software, which is built 38, has their own certificate on the one hand. On the other hand, also the machine provider, or the transformer manufacturer, in this case it's Rheinhausen, they provide a special certificate. And on the third hand, the provider of the network, of the electricity network, he in addition has a special security certificate. And these three components, in combination with a limited access in time slots and in location, make sure that nobody else could really handle that and control that IoT infrastructure component, this transformer to be precisely. A good example considering security right from the beginning, which leads us to our next big topic, security by design. So, Thomas, there are some governance aspects in this field. What is important from your point of view for that?
Yeah, Robert, we were talking about that. Adding security afterwards is a good thing if it's the only alternative you have, but it won't be sufficient for future products. So that's the idea of having security right from the beginning, from the design phase and over the whole life cycle. So also to guarantee secure operations afterwards. So that's where security by design idea comes into the picture. And during our workshops, I think first before we take a look at the standards, we should take a look at several key elements of that security by design idea that we observed. And first, I think it was having components, hardware, firmware, or software components, or libraries, or operating systems that can be trusted. I think that's very important to know where are your trust anchors in that setting and have trust anchors that you can rely on. Then second, we saw it's not only enough to have different puzzle pieces and somehow combine them, but you need an overall architecture and you need to follow a certain design process, a secure development process to achieve a secure architecture in the end that can also be operated. And I think we saw a nice example from a little bit different industry, from the consumer IoT, from BSH. They showed their development life cycle or their security engineering process, how they call it, which really points out that there are systematic steps that you need to follow. And last, that's again my point, security by design also requires considering secure operations. So it's not enough to design a product for delivering it in a secure state, but also to give the possibility to securely operate it and to have an end of life someday. And the operation, it can be done by the company that buys the solution, by the company that originally provided the solution. I think we will see more concepts like managed by approaches, so where the company that is originally providing the equipment will also operate the equipment and also operate the IT aspects. So that might be one part for the future, but you could also see it different so that it's operated by someone else. But all need to have those features. And probably it's easiest if you start with imagining how the company providing the product could also run the product in the end.
Right. Yeah, especially from the data point of view, they are especially manufacturers for smart home devices. They are really interested getting the data, developing new services out of that.
As is the industry. Yeah, that's also true for us and our customers. If we get more data, we can improve our products and thus provide benefits to the customers and increase their productivity, increase their efficiency.
And to have an approach like security by design, it's easier to implement it in smart home devices.
Yeah, probably the cycles are different, plus probably the cost situation and the numbers are different, because for a consumer IoT, probably you have a little bit more cost pressure to provide the solution.
And Thomas, we heard a lot that these norms are really crucial and also practical and should be used and should be taken advantage out of that. What norms would you really prefer in that field? What are the, let me say, the best fit norms for these approaches?
During one of our workshops, Helene Ziegler from BSH, she gave us a very good overview over the standard that they are using in the consumer IoT field. It's the ETSI EN 303645. I have to read it. It's such a long name for a standard for consumer IoT. And I think that has some aspects that could also be adopted for industrial settings. It wouldn't be my preferred standard to start with, but for industrial applications. But there are already some interesting learnings in it. It's, of course, the systematic approach. It's the definition of processual and technical requirements in the beginning. And it's this considering the whole life cycle. So there are some key elements that we also need for industrial application. Looking at industrial applications, I would see two standards. The first, this is my kind of all-time favorite. It's the ISO 27000 series. And a second, which was in our workshops introduced by Fraunhofer ISAC, they gave a good overview over the IEC 62443. And so this ISO 27000 series, for me, it's the Swiss Army knife and has some things that are also important for product design and for secure operations. Just to name two of them, it's the continuous improvement, it's the PDCA cycle, which is from my perspective never old-fashioned. You can, everything follows this continuous improvement process, and you can do it in a standard way, you can do it in an agile way, but it's all about continuous improvement. And second is this risk-based approach, to say, look, we don't need the same security measures for every situation, for every product, but it depends on the risk situation, on our attacker models, on the threats, and on the use case we're looking at. And this is an idea that is, I think, very well adopted in this IEC 62443 standard. They have the idea of security levels. So for every product that you want to design or for every industrial solution, you take a look at what are my security requirements and what is my target security level. And then you get a kind of a big box of building blocks and recommendations and approaches to achieve those security levels. I think that's exactly the way to go. We don't need the highest security level for every component. It's simply not realistic in a productive environment because the demands also for operations would be that high. But we need to be clear, and that should be clear for the company that is providing solution and also for the users of a solution. What can I expect from that? And so I think that's a nice idea. By the way, the VDMA for mechanical engineering, they recommended to, as a standard, to target security level 2. Yeah.
It's not only a standard, it's also a common language among different partners and companies to discuss security aspects.
Definitely a benefit. I agree, Robert. Yeah.
And Thomas, what I also liked on that scheme was really this iteration model, which is always behind that. You define your security level, you draw measures, and at the end you validate that. Are these measures led to the goal I had, or do we have to improve that? So this approach, I think it's quite common. There's a lot of knowledge from the quality management world, also, let me say, flown in the security scheme.
It is, and I think glad you mentioned that, because I think that's where, especially in industrial companies, we have a lot of experience in quality management, in processes. There are so many demands, for example, from the safety area. Yes. And so in most companies, we already have existing processes, quality gates for such things. Yes. So it would be good to combine that and use the existing mechanisms, not to add completely new security things.
New processes which are bringing more bureaucracy. That's necessary to integrate that. So thank you, Thomas. I think right now we are at the end of our time, and we should maybe have a last view on the most important learnings we had, a short summarize, a brief overview on what was really important. Could you please start?
Yeah, or maybe I start with one that is not a typical security insight, but I was really impressed from that series how many innovative ideas we have there in Bavaria, and how the combination of ideas from companies that are rather on the application side and others that are providing solutions and tools, how with that combination we can create smart solutions to security.
It is really the aspect of if these people work together, a lot of innovation comes out. So I would add maybe what was a little bit surprising for me, that we should and we have to start with the low-hanging fruits. It's unbelievable, but state-of-the-art remote tools and protocols, inventory and segmentation aspects of the industrial network, they are keen and they have to be tackled at first steps. Also, we should stress the awareness, activities and follow some basis processes. These very, very low-hanging fruits bring a lot of security wins.
You're right, Robert. I fully agree. Starting with the low-hanging fruits, with the basic steps, that's the right starting point. But then, and that was another learning for me, it's also important for the future to consider the secure life or the whole life cycle for security, from the product development. Architecture is really an important topic, thinking not only of a single solution, but thinking of it as a whole architecture in its later environment, and then also thinking about secure operations. So considering the whole life cycle. That's a takeaway for me. And this will require probably some knowledge.
Right. And knowledge is the key for the next and last aspect we tackled in our workshop series. It was education. So we face a lack of experts in this field. This is one fact we face in almost all countries. So we have to foster education resources. In our workshops, Mrs. Professor Holler from Hochschule Augsburg, she mentioned that the university there developed a new master study curriculum integrating not only electronic and informatics as key skills, but also management and leadership aspects, to be able that experts could explain what they have to do, what they want to achieve with their colleagues. In former times, it was still difficult to have a common language, a common understanding on the situation. Right now, this is really key for surviving, because the threats are more serious than before. And on the other hand, education is not only by the experts, it's also an aspect of, let me say, educating all people in all relevant fields of awareness, though they are able to handle security in a professional and safe manner. So this is, from my point of view, also an important learning which we had out of our series.
Product managers, automation engineers, operators, they all need a certain amount of security knowledge. Right. That is an important message, and I think, for example, Jan Weira from University for Industry, he showed how to do that in a very easy way with virtual education concepts. It doesn't have to be days or weeks of security education, but you could also use small learning bits. But important is to have a broad education, to raise awareness so that everyone knows about the importance of the topic. And that goes up to, and that's probably my last message, that goes up to management level. So also, security is also a management task. It's not something for the IT department or the automation department or product development to take care. Of course, they need to create the architectures, the concepts, the proposals. But it needs to be on the management agenda, being aware of the risks, being aware that there are solutions to those risks, and that it's a value to have secure solutions, because they are the enabler for future business in the area of digitalization.
So I would only add that this management aspect is relevant also if you talk about how do we monitor awareness. The tools of a University for Industry, these virtual tools allow for testing. They allow for monitoring a progress in awareness over time. So this is a duty of management as well, to be, let me say, responsible for that.
Yeah, keeping track, following the continuous improvement process. Yeah, right. You're right. There we have it again.
We have it again. So thank you, Thomas, for this interesting speech, or for your contributions. And thank you also to the audience listening us. And you can easily connect us by email if there are questions. We are very, very happy if we get feedback. And thank you and good luck. And let me say a very, very good security development in Japan. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you also from me. Wish you a fruitful discussion in your conference. And thank you, Robert. Thanks for visiting. Thanks for having this nice conversation. I think we'll continue that in the future. There are still a lot of topics in security to be discussed.
For sure. Thank you, Thomas.